Okay, we'll get started there. Well, thank you very much for joining. Nice to see you all again. Hopefully, this won't be the first one that you've been to, but we might have a few new people here. Just to do introductions, my name is Fraser Stewart. I'm the Operations Director at HebHomes. And today's session is called Bespoke or Kit, and what is best for you. So I'm joined by Alasdair Stephen, Managing Director of HebHomes, and Neil Stephen, who's the Managing Director of Dualchas. So hello both, and thank you for joining. The
Thanks, Fraser.
webinar, hello Neil. The webinar has been recorded, so it will be uploaded to YouTube afterwards. So your cameras and microphones are off by default. So I'll do a quick introduction to both companies just now before handing over to Neil and Alasdair. So at HebHomes, we specialise in contemporary sustainable kit homes delivered across the UK and Ireland. Our focus is on combining strong architectural design with manufacturing precision, creating homes that are design-led, energy efficient, and delivered with greater speed and cost certainty than traditional build routes. And we're delighted to be hosting this session jointly with Dualchas Architects. So Dualchas are an award-winning Skye and Glasgow-based practice known for their beautifully crafted, highly contextual bespoke homes. Their work is rooted in landscape, place, and materiality. Each project is completely individual, carefully considered, and shaped around the client and the site. Dualchas are featured at a permanent exhibition at the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh, and both Dualchas and HebHomes are featured at the V&A in Dundee as well. Dualchas were actually the first Scottish architectural practice to be invited to exhibit at the Venice Biennale in 2023. So while both HebHomes and Dualchas share a passion for contemporary architecture and sustainable living, we approach delivery slightly differently. So today it's really about exploring the differences openly and honestly, not in terms of which is better, but which route might be right for you, depending on your priorities about speed, certainty, design flexibility, cost, and risk. So I will pass you on to Neil and Ali just now, and I'll rejoin the call at the end. So I'll leave it to you guys.
Okay, thank you, Fraser. I hope everybody can hear me. There's a couple of messages saying people can't hear us, but I'm assuming everything's okay, Fraser.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So I think Dualchas and HebHomes, so I'm a director of both, as is Alasdair, and HebHomes was set up as an offshoot of Dualchas initially when people were wanting designs very similar to what we'd already done. We thought, well, okay, let's set up a kit company so we can deliver it more easily, because an architect quite often is there for a more unique approach. Whether you're doing HebHomes or Dualchas, there's some things that every project shares in common and they don't change. So quite often you have to deal with the access, with drainage, with services, ground conditions, topography, planning constraints, the local market, contractor availability, and these all apply no matter what. And many of the costs that you have in a project will be before you've actually started, because they're determined by the site. So if you have a remote site in a remote location with a long access road, that can be very expensive. I mean, one anecdote I was going to share was when I was a young architect, I met a young couple in the Northwest Highlands on site, and they wanted to build by the shore, and there was about a quarter-mile access route, and I just thought it was a bit crazy what they were wanting to do, because I knew the budget was limited. And they brought somebody with them who turned out was the contractor, this old Highland gentleman, and he said, well, if you look over there in the distance, you'll see a caravan. That was another couple who decided to build by the shore. And by the time the road reached the shore, all they could afford was a caravan, and they've now been there for 10 years. And it was a good example of why understanding your site and understanding the site costs are very important before you decide on whether it's a kit house or whether it's bespoke, because those costs tend not to change. But what you can do, whether it's through HebHomes or whether it's through Dualchas, is make the right decisions about where you build, how you fit a building into landscape, and how you minimise the infrastructure costs as far as practical, and understand that before you buy the site, before you embark on your project. So this question, which is better, is probably the wrong place to start, because it's two different processes. I think it's more to do with what your expectations are as the client and what you look to have. I mean, the projects here it's showing at the top, there's a Dualchas build, and below it is a HebHome build. Both lovely projects, but both very different in their approach to design.
Yeah, I mean, just to summarise what Neil said there, it's the main difference between Bespoke and choosing a HebHomes is the client journey in a way, and you know that journey and whichever journey you choose will have a big impact on the experience that you have. So we're going to explore that and talk about the decisions, also your own views, your own dreams, also your own personality as to which journey is best. And obviously, budget comes into it as does the site. So we're going to have some examples of where a bespoke design is the best option for you. So I'll just move on to the next slide here. So yeah, it's two different journeys, two different experiences, not just ultimately different buildings that you'll end up with. So when bespoke is the right answer. So I suppose that image that we're showing here, that is when bespoke is the correct answer. And Neil, if you maybe want to describe what you found when you visited that site in Isle of Skye.
Well, at this site in Skye, I think the original idea of the client was to have a cottage sitting higher up on the lands at a high level, and it would capture the views, but there was a natural ravine within the landscape. And it was my wife, Laura, that designed this house. I take no credit whatsoever, but what she discovered was when you went down into the ravine and you got close to the shore, you had this amazing experience of the water being very close to you. And you could do something where you really concealed the view and then revealed the view as you step down through the buildings, you enter at a higher level. And so the idea was this journey and making most of the topography and the natural articulation of the site rather than just creating a flat area and plonking a house on it, which would have probably been a cheaper thing to do, but the result is something that's very special. This building won an RIB award. It won accolades, and it was really because of that experience of doing something that was very different. You've only showed the next slide, Alasdair. So the journey was through the house and down into this amazing view that's captured at the bottom. Now the clients, Julian and Celia, they had no idea they were going to get a house like this. So it was a real journey for them because the architect didn't come with an imposition. It was a collaboration. But the storytelling of what they could have rather than what they imagined they were going to have at the beginning, which was a sort of quite a traditional cottage, they had to go along with this journey. They had to trust it. And at the end, they've got something which is they couldn't have imagined they were going to have. But they think the house is amazing and they absolutely love it.
I mean, it was, as Neil says, it was a more expensive option. And the house was featured on Channel 4 House of the Year. And when the clients were interviewed, I think the husband said, it was going a bit over budget, but fortunately my wife's father died and we came into some money. It was something along those lines. But this is the journey. If that quote is wrong, I apologise. But yeah, so this is the journey. You end up with this spectacular view. And unfortunately, the photographer was there at low tide. But when it's high tide, you do think you're floating over the sea. And, it's just quite a spectacular experience to be in that building.
You want to show the next project, Alasdair? I think this is one where I think the site dictates your approach. I mean, this is an Ord in Skye, and there is actually a walled garden. This is an old steading, but there's a walled garden close by associated with Ord House. And that project, we were approached by a couple, and when you're doing a design in a walled garden, you've got to be very sensitive to the walled garden. And we didn't end up doing that project, and that couple sold the site. And what's up at the Ords, the walled garden is somebody just plonked a kit house in the middle of the garden, and it's the wrong approach because the site dictates. And in this one, this is an old steading, as you can see, and it's not protected in any way, but it's important historically within the community because it's remembered. It has memories and stories attached to it, to do with gathering livestock and the life of the community, of this rural community. And if you show the next slide, Alasdair, this is the plan of it. So it was a simple steading, and we'd actually looked at this years and years ago for another client, and they wanted just to renovate the building, but actually beyond that wall at the front, which is to the west facing wall, when you go up high, you've got this amazing view of the Coolins. But when you're in that steading ruin, or when you're within that garden, you don't get that view at all. So it's a real shame. You're in this most amazing location, but the view is concealed from you. So our approach this time was, well, how do we do this so we actually create something which gives you an amazing experience? And again, it was my wife Laura came up with the idea. She said, well, why don't we build a new building at the rear of the site, use the ruin as to create a walled garden and to create lovely spaces, and then have a journey where you go up and then you see over the wall and you get a view of the Coolins.
So I think the point that for these first two projects we're showing is that it does happen at HebHomes as well. People come to us and say, I want a LH102 PD.3, and then you look at their site and you're in a situation where either the site is so spectacular that it demands something better, or the site itself just doesn't lend its, you do have to come up with a solution where you grab the view. There's no point in having the view over the Coolins if you're stuck down looking into some grass or some bracken. So this was the issue here. You don't knock that down and put it in a longhouse. You come up with a bit of imagination to end up with something a bit more special.
So you can see the approach here was to place a building at the rear of the site. At the front, we're creating a walled garden, a courtyard garden. At the back, at the rear, we're creating a fern garden against the old wall, and it's a beautiful old wall. And then there's a modern building that's located to create those two spaces of the fern garden at the rear and the courtyard garden, sort of this hidden garden at the front, and a building which sits in that landscape. And if you move to the next slides, and there's the upstairs. So as you come up the stairs, a big wall of glass that will capture the view over the courtyard, but more importantly, towards the Coolins. That amazing view that you have in Ord, if anyone's ever been there. So there's the section. So the section is key. So you can see that the ruined walls are still there, but when you get up high, you've got this view over the top. So there's an image of how we imagined it. Now that image was created by Harris Bug, who are the landscape designers who are creating the garden. They're due to go on site in April to do the garden. So this was an idea of what it could be. So we've got the Corten steel, which relates back to the rusty red roof that you saw in the old steading. We've got concrete at the base because the old walls, the steading, lots of concrete mixed in with it. And then the old walls are retained to create this special space. So you've got the intimacy of this secret concealed garden at the base, and you go up high and you've got this elevated view out over the Coolins. So I think the next photograph shows the stage we're at just now. So the building is completed, but the garden isn't. And to do this as an architect compared to doing a kit house, there's a lot more work in it. And that's one of the reasons why doing bespoke tends to be more expensive for this sort of project, because a lot more thought goes into it, a lot more detailing, and a much closer connection and dialogue with the contractor to make sure they get it right, because there's a lot of specialist work to try and create a building like this, which is really rewarding. You can see this is an image of the ground floor bedroom. So we deliberately wanted to create this intimacy with the rear wall, and with that's just natural ferns and vegetation growing out of the wall. There'll be a fern garden planted there this spring, and so that will be incredibly verdant and overwhelming in its greenness. And the dark green of the bedrooms is about trying to create that cavern-like intimacy. So very deliberate effect. The next slide just shows some of the detailing. So as you come up the stairs, that stair is detailed with Angus and Mac, who are a great joinery company based in the Highlands. Simpson Builders did all the oak panelling on the upper floor, and you can see just the detail that's gone into the set of drawers, the terrazzo surround, which is made using local Clachan stone with a local craftsman, and the level of care that goes into that. So that's, I think, when you're working with an architect, there's no I don't think there's much point working with an architect to do something that's just run of the mill or standard. When you're working with an architect who's more ambitious than that, you collaborate with them to try and make something special. And that's where the architects, I think, earns their crust mainly at the beginning of the project with the idea, how you develop the idea, but secondly, working with the contractor and the client to get the quality of detailing which makes something feel special and feel sharp.
Yeah, I mean that's the point. If you are going to choose an architect, you want to work with an architect who knows how to detail to this level of quality, which Dualchas obviously can do.
And that's just the view of the kitchen, so it's you can get a sense of the view out the rear. Opens out to the trees and the ruins, and at the front you'll be looking at over this amazing garden, connection of the garden, but also the view of the Coollan's beyond.
So the next project is Neil's own house, which he designed in collaboration with his wife. So I believe Neil did the plan and Laura did the detailing, which is...
Well, I don't think that's quite true. I mean, Laura chose the materials. I mean, I think what's, if you go to the next slide, Alasdair, if you're trying to, the key thing about this site in Achnacoich is that the reason we didn't do a kit house, I mean, our mortgage would be much smaller if we had, I can assure you. But we wanted to make the building, the house, the exact length of that stone wall, which is the stone wall connected to the garden of the neighbouring house, Gillen House, which you can see there to the southwest. And so to create a space which will become a really beautiful garden one day when we get around to it. But the other thing we wanted to do was try and create something that responded to context. So we didn't want to just place a house stuck in a hill with lots of glass looking out for a view. We wanted to do something which somehow bedded in and connected to the neighbouring Gillen House, which is an old white house, and the walled garden that was attached to Gillen House.
So I think the thing about this house is, when I show you the plan in a second, is that like the HebHomes plans, it is based on the old Hebridean longhouse. I mean, in many ways, because the detailing and the quality of detailing, it couldn't be further away from the old Black House. But the plan is similar. If any of you know the Black House in Arnold and Lewis, it's very similar to this. You know, you've got the two independent wings in parallel to each other.
Yeah, and it's a simple plan, but to actually achieve simplicity in the finish requires thought. So it looks straightforward. We don't do any wonky lines, but you can see everything is on a grid and it lines up. And when you have things lining up, you tend to get a sense of calm and balance. And you'll see the walls there are extremely thick, so it's not timber frame. We use clay block. Now, this was Laura's idea. She wanted to create a sense of solidity and using really natural materials, using clay block, but also for the house to feel really solid, so there was no sense that it was going to move or shake in a storm. It was really bedded in, and you have that very deep reveals where we could conceal shutters, and that Scottish solidity of the old stone house is what we wanted to feel inside.
Well, I think this is something which is common to both HebHomes and Dualchas. You can have these very simple forms of the landscape, and you know, with HebHomes, with the SIP, and in particular the CPS, they are thick walls and they're very strong. And if anyone's experienced living in an older kit house with a 100 or 97mm timber frame and 100mm mineral wool, you know, they're cold, they're drafty, and they start shaking in the wind. But you know, the feedback we get at HebHomes from our clients who've got these houses is they look out the windows. Windows are like cinemas. It's you know, they're looking out in the epic storms, and they'll sit there with a dram or a glass of wine, and their neighbours are hunkering down scared. But this house here just shows this simple form, which is common. And you know, the planners love these simple forms, but just looking at that on the outside, there is a level of detailing in there, which you'll see with both HebHomes and Dualchas, which you don't get on the run-of-the-mill kit.
Well, I think if you move to show the next image, Alasdair, this house was about the journey through the space. So but to top of the detailing, we've got those solid walls using clay block, clay plaster. We've got a CLT roof. We've got a terrazzo floor, and you'll notice there's no ridge beam So the detailing of that was to create a temporary ridge. The CLT dropped into place, glued and fixed with steel plates on the outside to get this very clean look. But also it's about concealing the view. So as you move through the house, the view of the Coolins isn't revealed until you step up into the next level. If you show the next photograph, Alasdair, and there you've got a view of the Coolins. It's a 30-degree pitch roof. Now the reason we did it 30 degrees is because sometimes volumes can feel too big. We've got quite a high eaves level in this house because we've got high windows. The windows are 2.6 meters high. But we wanted it not to feel too large. We didn't want it to feel like a church, but it does have this lovely sense of space and intimacy. And what's lovely about using natural materials, when the low sun comes in, the building sort of glows. It's got a natural honey sort of feel to it. It's like you're inside a honeycomb when the low west sun comes through that window later in the year. And we've also around the house, I mean, just to like, we've got, we don't have white ones anymore, but we've got 10 sheep, we've got 3 pigs, we've got 2 horses, 2 ponies, 3 dogs, and a cat, and 3 children. So we don't have time to do anything other than look after them all. So that's our life in this house. So the next image, this is really just to show you the level of detailing that you can have when you're working with an architect. So those doors are 2.6 meters high to line through with the height of the windows, and they were made by joiners in Edinburgh. There's no facings around them, so you've got that shadow gap. And I mean, they were quite expensive, but it required a lot of thought. So it was me designing it alongside a specialist joiner who do his own drawings, and then they get built, and then to locate them in place with the plaster took a lot of thought and effort. And you'll see there's a sliding door there as well in the image on the left, just to the left of Bozzy, the whippet. And again, to detail that requires a lot of thought and a lot of care. When you're doing a Heb home, you don't have to spend that amount of thought or spend that amount of time in these sort of details. And because of that, it'll be a lot cheaper than doing this sort of detail. But when you're working with an architect, this is the level of quality you can aim for and be ambitious about to try and create that quality of space.
So this next project we're going to look at, I'm just back from a show in Dublin, and apparently in Ireland, the grant you get for renovating and extending properties has gone up from 70,000 euros to 140,000 euros. So because of planning restrictions, a lot of people are buying old cottages. So this is a way that so just to reveal, we are going to be bringing out an extension range for the Irish market because there's a lot of people requesting it at the show. But this particular project is an example of what you can do if you find an old building like this and you want to preserve the quality. And this was done through Dualchas, but it is something which is quite similar to what a HebHomes could look like because of the simple forms. So if you want to describe what happened here, Neil.
Yeah, this was for our client Chris Johnson. She works for the UN. She's traveling across the world working in conflict zones, but she wanted to find a place in Scotland in the northwest in Diabig where she could just relax, have a place that she could call home and go up the mountains. And so this ruin was on the site. And the easiest thing to do would have been to just knock this down and put any old house on it. But I think when there's an old ruin, there's also a story, there's a place within the community, and to actually preserve that and to show respect towards it is important. So that was our first thought. How do we show respect towards what's here already and create something special? So
I mean, just to add to that, Neil, I mean, sometimes people come to us, HebHomes clients, and there's an old ruin, and they say, okay, I want this knocked down and I want to replace it with a HebHomes. Quite often the better approach, if renovating it is too expensive, is actually to build adjacent, create an external space, a nice relationship between the old ruin, the old building, and the new building. So you preserve it, and then what you can do is you can do it up in the future. You can use it as an outbuilding. You can convert it into a garage. You can, one of our first clients converted an old ruin that he initially intended was going to knock down. We built the house adjacent, eventually renovated it, and then they sold them both as 2 separate houses. So you don't have to knock down, and if it's got character like this, then it's best preserved. But we'll just show you what Dualchas did.
So our first thought was, let's take the ruin and preserve it the way it is. We actually had to rebuild it because of the quality of the stone, but just keep it as it is. Take the exact width of the gable of the ruin and match it with the exact width of a new build. So the gable and the profile, the roof pitch is exactly the same, but it's a different material. And it was a very, very simple idea, but we're not going to connect them. We're only going to connect them with some glass so they feel separate. And there's this very subtle glass link. And then that glass becomes an experience. That link becomes an experience as you move through the building. So you've got the different materials and that connection to the outside. So it's a very, very simple concept and idea. But that's the sort of thing you can do when you're working with an idea. Well, working with an architect is to come up with an idea that you then develop. And there's something very lovely of the journey of developing an idea from the start and taking it through to a completed project. And that's where working with an architect closely in a collaboration. I use the word collaboration because the journey is a collaboration. Good projects don't happen without good clients, because the clients drive the ambition to a large extent. Like an architect can't force you to do anything. But what we can do is share ideas with you, develop them, try and get it within, work to a budget as far as we can, or have an understanding of the budget and brief from the outset, and then try and develop a project to completion. So
one point to make is that quite often at HebHomes, people come to us and they've got an existing building and they say, well, okay, I want a HebHomes next to my existing house and I want it to be connected. And, if we agree to do it, we'll say, yeah, but you do need an architect to deal with that connection between, the new HebHomes and your existing building. And what you'll see with this project in a moment is just how beautiful that connection can be, but it has to be detailed really carefully, and you have to be on site to see how that connection works.
So that's the project realised. So you've got the stone building with a tin roof, then sort of a rust colour. And then you've got this simple object, a timber building that's also got timber on the roof. And the reason for the timber on the roof and the walls was it felt quite sculptural. It felt like a simple object. The next photograph shows the link, so they're disconnected. And it's a lovely photograph that was taken just the warm glow of the interiors and then the two buildings sitting separate in the landscape. But it's very subtle and simple, but it's the simplicity of it and the simplicity of the idea, and then trying to realise the idea, which turns it into better architecture than the standard.
You can see from this project how important the material finish is to the overall success of the project. You can see with those autumnal colours, the colours of the stone, the timber turning colour. It really is beautiful. And these are materials, as well as the metal roof, that are common within the landscape. So if you use them, then the building can look beautiful. When we first started off in architecture, the planners insisted that every house had to be white, that it had to be windows with vertical emphasis, you had to have a slate covered roof. So they were just copying the traditional button ben or white house. But you can see these more subtle colours actually lends to more beauty.
Yeah, that's a shot of the interior. I'm aware we're probably taking too long on this, Alasdair, so maybe we should speed up a bit. But yeah, so that there's that simple glass link. It's been very carefully detailed to conceal the gutters, and again, just that lovely space there's no ridge beam in here. The stove is placed in front of the frame of the window, so all you're seeing is this glass, and so there's a lot of care taken in that. But it creates a place of tranquility for our client, and she absolutely loves her home.
So the reality of Bespoke, Bespoke, this is what we're trying to get across. Bespoke is, if you're working with a good architect, then you end up working with a good contractor, two very, very important things. And you also have to have the right outlook, the right attitude, and also deep enough pockets. But it does take more time. You're designing from scratch. One way to describe it, I remember he was actually a friend of ours, but he turned up with his wife, and he was wanting to build a house the early days of Dualchas architects, and he had an A3 piece of paper in front of him, and he said, I want a house like this, and he drew a rectangle, and then he started drawing a circle inside the rectangle, and he circled so many times, like doodling as if he was on the phone, that it looked like he was drawing Mr. Messy from the Mr. Men series. And then he passed the paper over to myself and Neil and said, how much does that cost? And we couldn't really, it was impossible to answer the question, but that is the thing about Bespoke. You are starting off with a blank bit of paper. So there is more cost uncertainty. You never have cost certainty no matter what approach you have. but there's more cost uncertainty with the bespoke design, and it will take longer because you're going through a design process which includes detailing everything up from scratch. But what you will end up with, as we've shown here, if you've got a good architect, is you will end up with an outstanding, unique piece of architecture. And that's what some people want.
I just add to that is, I mean, one thing I've written a blog about this. It's on the website or on LinkedIn if anybody wants to see it. That's the key thing when you're doing a bespoke project is that you've got the site costs or the uncertainty of the site costs, which we discussed at the beginning, but also when the design's developed, you understand the site and you've done a concept design, the first thing we would always do with the clients after that is to get a quantity surveyor to do a budget costing. Now, the initial approach, when you have a brief and a budget that you give to us initially as architects, we'll interrogate that and we'll tell you if it's not enough based on empirical knowledge. But I think before you ever go on to submit for planning, to have a proper cost report done that's based on the site information and a proposed notional specification is a really, really useful thing to do. Now, it doesn't mean to say that the building will end up costing that, but at least you've got a guide that you can work to, because we've had many clients over the years who've come to us with a house designed by another architect. They've taken it right through to tender and the job comes in way over budget. And when you look at the design and you look at the tenders that come back, the tenders aren't wrong. It's just it was an expensive build, but it's never been interrogated or the honest conversation wasn't had at the beginning. And there's nothing more demoralizing than being excited about a project and then finding out that you can't build it. So I think there's an onus there, not just on the architect, but on the client as well, to take responsibility for their budgets, to take advice on their budgets, and realise that sometimes you can't have everything. There's what you need and there's what you want, and they're not always the same. And the architect will work closely with you and with the quantity surveyor to try and make sure that you get a great project, but also that you don't have the stress of running out of money, which is like nobody wants.
Yeah, when I was in Ireland the weekend, this young couple, they were still in their 20s, and they said, we've just got planning for this house, and they unrolled the design, and I immediately thought that's at least €2 million. But I just asked them, have you discussed the cost with the architect? And they said, oh, well, we're doing that next week. I mean, maybe they worked for Google or something, I don't know, but yeah, it was going to be an expensive build. But the point Neil's making is you have these conversations at the very beginning. You don't wait till the end. So when a kit fits better. So, I mean, one thing to say first of all is that, with HebHomes, the kits are Dualchas designed. So they are architect designed houses. I mean, when myself and Neil started off, that was the real impetus behind the business to begin with, is because we were seeing kit houses being built which had no architectural input at all, really. They weren't suitable for the Scottish landscape, and we thought we could do better. So that was the basis of HebHomes, and Dualchas as well. So that's been, within Scottish architecture, that's been very influential. I mean, there's a lot of people who are copying our style. The longhouse is pretty standard within rural Scotland now as an approach. But what you do get with a kit is you get more speed, you get more certainty, and you're using a tested system. What you don't have is the certainty of the site. So on the HebHomes website, we've introduced this new pricing tool, which I think is quite useful. So if you buy a site on an island off the west coast of Scotland, don't expect it to cost the same as in central Scotland. And if that site is halfway up a hill with a 200-metre track to put in, with some of the hardest rock or the deepest peat in the world, then again, don't expect it to cost the same. So this pricing tool gives you options, and you've got to be honest when you use it to choose these options, if you've already got a site, to see how your kit costs might end up, or your house costs might end up. So yeah, I sort of mentioned that there. So architect design doesn't mean it has to be bespoke. So what we'll show you with a couple of these images is that, when you've got an architect involved in the design of a kit, you don't have the high level joinery detailing that we showed you in some of these previous Dualchas projects, but you still should have, lovely architectural spaces. And as I said, all these HebHomes designs were either original Dualchas designs that were built, or they've been developed by Dualchas.
Yeah, I think when that house that's shown there, that's over in the west coast, isn't it? And who's the client, Alasdair?
Well, that was Edmund Duval, who's a famous
so he's a world-renowned
ceramicist.
ceramicist, and he was delighted. I mean, you think, will he choose an architect? But he chose a HebHome, and which was very flattering, and he's very proud of his house, and it went up very quickly with one of our registered contractors in a very remote part of Scotland. He paid more because of its remoteness, because of the travel time involved, but he got a very good quality building that he's thrilled with.
Yeah, and this is a house that, if you're interested in building HebHomes, you can arrange with Lindsay to go and visit. So this is down in Dumfries and Galloway. So you can see here that, that again, it's a standard HebHomes design. It's a HebHomes kitchen, which has been put in. But the client, I think it was his son actually, set himself up as the interior designer and has furnished it in a particular style that works very well. So a lot of our clients, they will, not just put the final coat of paint on, they will dress the house and give the character to the building. So the next one here, this is a client up in Caithness, and she's gone for very muted colours, a lot of oak and a lot of off-whites. And again, it's her style, but it's quite beautiful. And this is in the Isle of Skye. You're looking out there on an old shed which has had a metal roof put on, and more of our clients now are choosing that colour of roof. As I mentioned earlier on, in the past the planners were very prescriptive about the way the houses had to look. We couldn't use timber. Everything had to be white and slate coloured. And I think it was when the planners went on a field trip to Norway, or a little jolly to Norway, and they came back and they'd seen how successful timber was in the Scandinavian countries. That was the first ever house at Dualchas were allowed to do timber clad, but they put in a planning condition that we had to paint it white. We ignored that bit, but since then, especially in Highland region, the planners are delighted with. They understand that it's about the simple form and the colours, rather than having small windows and everything being looking like an old traditional building. So
I think we see partners as our collaborators as well. I think if you have a good relationship with planners and make them feel as if they're part of the design process, it works much better. And I think planners have got to take that approach as well. And certainly in Skye in previous years, that's been the case. And further afield in the Highlands, it's been a collaboration, and we all want the same thing, which is to create better, thriving communities using good design.
I know. I mean, one of the problems, and I feel sorry for planners quite often, is that they are presented with a lot of bad architecture. People turning up with, inappropriate buildings and trying to get planning permission. So they like HebHomes, and they also like Dualchas, because what we're doing with Dualchas, we've got this idea that, when you build a house, it should be so pretty in the landscape that if a landscape photographer is happy to include it within one of his photographs, rather than going to Photoshop and getting rid of it. So just moving on to the next slide. Yeah, so again, this is a similar space to a HebHome, but this is a Dualchas. And Neil, if you want to explain, compared to what we've just seen with the HebHomes, what the difference here in a similar space, but the fact that it's designed by Dualchas.
Well, if you look closely, you'll see that all the floor, the Caithness slate floor lines through with the oak-faced panels, and they also line through with the edge of the windows. And to set that up, and also they lined the midpoint of the panels line through with the apex of the roof. So to set that up, the work done by the contractor was huge. He set grids of string on the site for setting out his windows, so he could line it through with the width of the panels, with the width of the slates. And so it requires a lot of thought. It requires a lot of detail. You'll also see that some of those panels, if you press them, you'll open it, and the TV is hidden behind some of those panels. There's glasses hidden behind panels. So a lot of thought went into it, and a lot of care by the contractor. But what was lovely was the contractor, George, the head joiner, he was inviting his old friends from Inverness to come and see this house he was building, because he was so proud of it. And you only get good quality builds when you've got contractors who care about it, and they care about the craft of building. So this is more time consuming, and it's more expensive than building a sort of standard plasterboard wall, because of the thought that's required both by the architect and the contractor. but the result can be really rewarding, and our client Dominic absolutely loves this house.
Yeah, so this is quite important, and it's about you yourself personally. You know, like what sort of person are you? If you're in a hurry and have got no patience, you probably won't have much time for an architect. You know, lying in bed thinking. We used to, quite funny, we used to employ this German architect who was very good, but a client couldn't go forward with the project, and he was given a small invoice for time spent, and the client said, "Can I see the sketches that you've done?" And he said, "Well, you've got to understand, I spent days and days lying in bed, not being able to sleep because I've been designing your building in my head." He did produce some sketches for him, but that's the thing, is that architecture and, you know, architects who care will spend a long time that you'll never see actually thinking about your project. So if you want speed and you want more certainty, then probably, you know, employing that German architect wouldn't have been the best approach for you.
But I can say that all personalities can employ an architect, and architects work for HebHomes, so let's not put it down to just personality. I think the most important thing is the journey and understanding what the journey is, and to have a clear idea of what the process is and how you manage the journey. And I think managing expectations and understanding where you're going and what can be achieved in a certain time, because there's so many things in architecture or within construction out with your control. So there's the dealing with planning and dealing with building control. How, you know, planning have been absolutely useless in some projects we've had in the Highlands. It's taken a long time in certain areas. Other areas it's really quick. Contractors, you can have times when all the good contractors are busy, and then getting the right contractor, you have to wait. So to get the one you want, you have to pay a bit more. So having an understanding of what the journey is, but realizing that the most important point is the end of being in your amazing house, and to have the patience to get there, because things will happen. But as long as you have clarity as to where you're going, then that's the most important thing.
Yeah, but you can see from what we've shown today that, you know, the level of detailing, you know, the beauty of some of the detailing from Dualchas. If you're the sort of person who is, you know, obsessed with detail by the architectural magazines and want that level of quality, then, and are looking forward to the journey of designing with an architect, as Neil say, collaborating with the architect to design something quite unique and beautiful, a real piece of craft. You know, choosing a kit house from a brochure, even if it's a beautifully designed kit house like HebHomes, might not be the journey that you're looking for. But likewise, you can have, you know, you can have those interests in design, but you don't have the budget. So maybe it's best not to engage an architect to do that bespoke piece of work. And that's when HebHomes are perfect, because they are architect design, they are beautifully detailed. They're a lot quicker, but they will be cheaper, quite a bit cheaper ultimately. So yeah, the closing guidance, you know, the right choice early saves stress later on. I mean, that image there, Neil, if you maybe want to tell the story about that particular house that's looking onto Blavin on the Isle of Skye.
Well, this house, the site had planning consent for a kit house, and but our client wanted something different. And again, my wife Laura, she's obviously the talent in the family and the business, so she designed this, and the client was fully supportive of it. And it's, rather than sort of putting a kit house on the site, she wanted to create this series of boxes that sat lightly on the landscape, and so it's up on posts. And the planner was fully supportive, which was great. But then there was a big campaign organised by a holiday homeowner locally, who lived in Oxford. I think there was about 100 signatures from Oxford of people objecting. It went to committee. Every single councillor was opposed to it. One of it described it as resembling a Soviet-era munitions bunker or a doomsday vault. And they had all these arguments as to why it shouldn't get planning consent, even though our argument was it was actually quite recessive in the landscape, and it was much lower impact than the building there before. It went to the report of the Scottish Government, who backed us 100%, and it got through. And so the planner supported us and the reporter supported us, and it got consent, and it ended up winning award for best building in the 2025 Scottish Design Awards. So our client felt vindicated, but the most important thing is the house is really special to him, and the views of Blavin from those windows are just astonishing. I mean, what a sight! And when you've got a special site like this, I think it deserves a special building, which I think the one Laura designed is.
Yeah, so yeah, hopefully you've found that that useful. We're now going to be answering some questions. Fraser's going to show me how to find them.
Just wheel myself back into view. So we've had some questions coming in through the webinar. Thanks, Neil and Ali. So we'll just run through them from the top. We've got about 12 minutes left in the session, and we might run over a little bit, so don't feel obliged to hang around if you need to go. Okay, so can HebHomes manufacture bespoke design by Dualchas? That's one for you, Alasdair.
It's well, I mean, we not really. When you say bespoke, it's that level of detailing and quality is difficult. I mean, what we can do is we can offer a certain level of flexibility with HebHomes. So we're always trying to improve and expand our range of designs. And it would, technically it would be possible to get Neil to sketch something up for you, and for us to do it as a HebHomes, but that's not cost effective for us as a business. We're all about we've designed it already, we've got it drawn up on Revit, three-dimensional CAD system, and we've got it pre-engineered. So you're sort of defeat the purpose, and it won't be really, if you're wanting something bespoke from Dualchas, you really need Dualchas to be there to follow it through, to get all the beautiful details. So I wouldn't recommend it if taking that approach.
Can I just add that not all Dualchas projects have the level of detail of the buildings we've shown, and you can do a bespoke project in the same build-ups, same panel system, same plasterboard as HebHomes, but make it specific to yourself. And I think Ali's right. The efficiency of HebHomes is not too many changes. If it's a completely bespoke house, come to Dualchas and we'll do something for you, and we'll do it efficiently.
On to the next one. Can a HebHome be transported in a container overseas?
Yeah, well, we have done that. Yeah, we might be exporting out to South Korea. We built a house in the what's Granada. So yeah, no, we can do it. The easiest thing for us is just to deliver it to the port and let the client arrange the import. I wouldn't export to America just now because I don't know what Donald Trump would think, even though we are Hebridean like his mother. They might get stuck in the ports, you never know.
Thanks, Ali. And can HebHomes do extensions to a current house that is small and being retrofitted?
Well, it wouldn't be, a small extension, probably not, especially if it's in an urban context. What I mentioned before is we're going to be doing a series of standard extensions, which are really specifically for people who've got rural property. And then we can add to it. There's plenty of space around it. But if it's in a confined space, especially if you're in a city like London, no, it'd be far too difficult for us.
I think a lot of extensions, it's better with an architect because you've got so many site constraints and specific detailing that an architect would be better placed, and I think it'd be more cost effective ultimately.
Yeah.
Okay, on to building costs. Can you say something about all costs of building versus value of property after it is ready?
Well, that's a very good question, and it's the reason that all the small developers disappeared in 2008 in Scotland and haven't come back. I mean, if you think that you can build a house from scratch and then sell it for a profit, unless you're in the southeast of England where property prices are extremely high, it's not going to work. And that's why there's no small developers around. But I wrote a blog about this on the website. Think about it this way: if you build a new house which is future-proofed, which is exceptional fabric specification, which is really what you've got to do with a new building because of building regulations, that's going to cost you quite a bit of money. If you're going to do it, make sure it's a good bit of architecture like a HebHomes or a Dualchas house. But you've got to compare that against if you were to buy something from the existing housing stock. Almost everything from the existing housing stock is deteriorating in comparison rapidly compared to something that you would build. The Scottish Government and the UK Government, I don't think this has been delayed slightly, but they were saying that every building has to reach energy rating C by a certain, within a certain time period. To retrofit insulation and air source heat pumps, etc., to bring up to that energy rating is extremely expensive. If you don't do it, then your house in the future, you won't be able to get a mortgage, and it becomes, almost like a Doran house, worthless. So building a new house is by far the best option compared to, renovating an existing building, especially since you'd have to pay 20% VAT. So you can't really look at it as how much some surveyor down the high street is going to value at, is thinking to the future.
Well, can I just add that I think renovation is actually a really good thing to do, because you're particularly if the building is value, and we've shown examples of it, and it's an old stone building, there's a lot of effort and love went into building that, and giving it a new life is very worthwhile, but it's not always the cheapest approach. And I think to do with value, if you do a good bit of architecture, we'll see this year, when an estate agent will value a house on the number of bedrooms, the number of rooms, they never value the quality of the architecture, because they're not, I don't think they're qualified to value the quality of the architecture. So if you can do something that is beautiful, that is really well designed, then it will have a much, much higher resale value than something which is not. And but the estate agents find it hard, so the valuers find it very hard to pick up on this. So generally, your house will cost more to build than its current value will be initially. But you're investing in the future, not only in a great house, but also something that will have high value in the future.
One question about design in general. Can you elaborate on design in general? I noticed limited fenestration on side elevations. Is this a function of design intentions, or perhaps a function of location or climate?
Well, I think all. So will I answer this, Alasdair?
All right, okay.
I think one of the things we see at Dualchas is that we respond to context, and I mean sometimes I think when you've got constraints of a site, sometimes the site will dictate how you approach the design. So, for example, the image in front of you there of that house, it's all about the view to the front. Now, there are windows to the side, but there's something really lovely about creating this blank approach of walls as you approach that one bit of glass that leads you to the front door. And so there's some very deliberate decisions made about design, about protecting views, about not having too many openings. But we always design also to try and have cross ventilation, to bring in light at the right points of the day, to think about potential overheating, to think about how you enjoy the house at different seasons of the year, how you protect from the wind. So design is about context, and even when you're doing a HEB home, when you've got a standard design, you'll want to try and get your entrance door onto the east or the north. So quite often the Highlands, you don't have the prevailing southwest wind hitting your front door, and it's really hard to keep the water out. So you're always thinking about context in design, whether it's pre-designed or whether you're doing something from scratch.
We also think about character. You mentioned earlier on, Neil, that you wanted the solidity of a Scottish building, the way you approached it. And if sometimes clients say they want big windows everywhere, that can cause heat loss, it can cause overheating, but also it can make the building look flimsy. And if you might feel exposed like a goldfish or a zoo animal if you get too much glass. So you can have lots of glazing capturing the magnificent view, but you want to be curried to an extent. You want the solidity of a Scottish building and a Scottish landscape.
Yeah, and I think one mistake people make is when they've got amazing views, they want that view from every room. In reality, trying to create a building that's a journey through different experiences, different spaces, different volumes, different views, so it's not all the same, and that makes the building much more interesting. And so, for example, that building there has actually got an amazing view of the Red Coolins out to the other side, and that's captured in another room, which is a very specific, much quieter view of. It's not looking on the ragged Blavin, it's looking on the hills of. It's looking over the community of Torrin, and it's looking onto the Red Coolins, and it's just a different experience, but special in its own way.
Thanks, Neil. And do HebHomes deliver to England? Where do we deliver, Alasdair?
We deliver to England. We've got a lot of houses, a lot of projects in England, and we do turnkey in England as well.
And Neil, Dualchas, do they work in England?
We do. We've completed a project in the Scilly Isles recently, which we're getting photographed later this year. We've got a project down in Dorset just now. So yeah, no, I think we do projects in many places, and I think the key thing is, like, wherever it is, we try and respond to context and work closely with the clients. And no, we really enjoy it. So we're doing another one in the Channel Islands as well, which is recently got planning. So yeah, we do work in England, and happy to speak to anybody who got a project for us.
Great. Tough question for you. What is a typical uplifting cost of architect design buildings versus architect building? So what's the uplifting cost between HebHomes and Dualchas?
Well, I'll answer this. So quite simply, if you were to take if an architect was to design a house that is exactly the same as a HebHome, both in terms of its site and its build up, but it's very similar in scale, then the construction cost should be the same. All that will be more is the design fees, because you've got architects' fees, engineers' fees, M&E fees, which will be higher than it would be on something that's pre-designed. But as soon as an architect's drawing comes through for a contractor and it's new to them, then they will factor in their own risk of guys on site scratching their heads saying, I'm not quite sure how to do this. So you have a benefit in HebHomes is the contractors have done it before, so it's quicker for them. It's like anything. Well, I was putting together an IKEA drawer set last week. The first one just about killed me, and the second one I did very quickly because I knew where the screws went. I didn't lose them while doing it. So actually the process of having done before makes the process quicker, and it makes it cheaper, because most of construction cost is time. But so I think when you work with an architect, when you're doing that level of detailing that I was showing earlier, there's more craft in it, so it is more time consuming, and so you can't say what the extra cost is. It depends on the project, but you just know that you will be investing a bit more. So if you are investing more, invest in quality, and so you get something that's you wouldn't get with a house.
Okay, that is nearly 2 o'clock for anyone that needs to get away. We've got another couple of questions. We'll probably spend another 5-10 minutes running through if anyone wants to stick around. Again, this will be recorded, so we'll send it round to everyone and onto YouTube as well. There's a question here about comparing bespoke and kit options. One of the stark contrasts is the size of windows to accommodate the lovely views. Is this a limitation in terms of cost or compliance from HebHomes?
Not really. I mean, some of those windows that you saw from Dualchas, for example, the Black House beginning, I mean they're hugely expensive, and HebHomes don't do them. But you can have a beautiful Dualchas house which has got the same size of windows that cost the same. So the point is you're probably limited to an extent with HebHomes because we used a standard window matrix. With Dualchas, you're not limited, and that means the budget can go a lot higher if you choose.
Okay. There's a question from a potential client who's looking at buying land and wants to do full turnkey option. Should we be opening discussions with you before we buy the land as a checkpoint? So that's one for you, Alasdair.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we always say is we're quite happy to have a look at the land before you buy, but if you do buy, get a conditional offer accepted, then we can get involved and start the planning process for you. Because if you buy a bit of land and you don't know what's under the ground, you don't know whether the electricity, you don't know if there's if you're going to have to dig out hard rock, or if there's going to be if there's peat on the ground, you have to deal with it in a certain way. All of these things can have a huge impact on cost. So someone once bought land, came to us, and on the two-dimensional plan it showed you a road going in, but when we got there, it was that two-dimensional plan, that road was going over a cliff. So you have to be careful. You've got to do your due diligence. So we're quite happy to talk now.
Okay.
And I just add, I mean, I've looked at the sites where it's got planning in principle, and all because something has got planning in principle doesn't mean to say that you can actually build. So this site with planning in principle in Skye, firstly, the only way the access track, again, like Alasdair's, was far too steep, and you'd have to take it into the neighbouring land to actually be able to turn an access track up the slope. And secondly, the only way to get the drainage to work was to take it on through neighbouring lands, because there was no drainage solution on the site, despite the fact that the technician who'd prepared the planning in principle from a different business had shown a working drainage solution. But neither of them worked, and the neighbour whose land was required to fix both the drainage and the roads was the seller's brother, and they'd fallen out 10 years previously and hadn't spoken since and hated each other. So what that meant was the site had no value except for grazing sheep. And even then, it was so rocky that it had no value for sheep. So our client was going to buy a worthless bit of land with planning in principle. So you have to be very careful. So as Ali says, your solicitors can just do HebHomes or Dualchas can go and help, because the won't organise the engineers to go on site. They won't organise to look at the electricity, or a lot of them don't, or to look at the drainage. So we can help with that, whether it's through Dualchas or HebHomes.
Okay, thanks, Neil. What's the best way to go about finding a site, and where would you look for one?
Well, the first thing to do is to register on our website, because we have fantastic information on how to find lands, including guides, little podcasts. We employed these Americans. Actually, it's AI, didn't employ Americans. And but also DM Hall, they will go out and find the site for you. You pay them a small fee, and they'll go and you just tell them what you're looking for. But you've got to be careful with sites, because we've had people in the past who, periodically would come and see us, and they were wanting to build a Dualchas house, and no site we suggested was ever good enough. And by the time they found one that they actually liked, the prices had quadrupled. So you're never going to find or it's unlikely to find the perfect site. But if you find something and you want us to have a quick look at it, just online, we're quite happy to do that.
Okay. And what is the design life of a HebHome?
Well, that's actually one of the questions we answer on our FAQs and our new homepage, because we're asked that all the time. So there's BBA certification with both the CPS and the SIP, which is minimum of 60-year lifespan. But in reality, as with most buildings, if it's cared for and looked after, it's going to last for generations. If you don't look after it, then after 60, 70 years, it's going to start looking a bit shabby.
And if the kit is being built on Arran, for example, would you use local contractors, or do you bring them over from the mainland?
Well, for the kits, we always do the installation. So we will bring them on, but the kit will go up in just a few days. And if you've got a good local contractor on Arran, and they don't have to travel and they don't have to get accommodation, then that's probably that should be the cheapest route. But we will also offer a turnkey service on Isle of Arran.
Okay. Okay, there's a few more that have come in. There's a question about how HebHomes can be modified. So what can and can't be done? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, there is a guide on our website about what's easy to change and what's more difficult to change. I'm actually going to be bringing out a new updated guide showing you some of the variations which we can do and which we've done. One of them is giving more storage space, and maybe separating out the kitchen from the living room. It could be putting in a snug, a little TV room or library coming off the living room. These are things that can all be done within the lean-to extension of the HebHomes, which we're quite flexible on. There's other things which we don't like doing, for example, changing the section. But just to point out, some tall people come to us and say we want taller ceilings. Our Irish range of houses are actually slightly taller because of Irish building regulations. So if you are a tall person who's interested in HebHomes and wants that extra height, we can accommodate you, unless you're like 7 foot or something.
Okay, another 2 questions, then we'll wrap up. Tough one for you, Alasdair. What is the average square metre price of a HebHome?
Well, again, I've got a blog on the website, which, if you want to go and look at it, which tells you not to use square metre rates when pricing a house. And the reason for that is just because, basically the smaller a house, you get certain features which are going to stay the same, like your roads, your air source heat pump, your sewage. those are going to be to an extent fixed costs, whether it's a wee house or big cost. So basically what that means is that the smaller the building, the higher the square metre cost is going to be to an extent. The bigger the building, the lower it's going to be, but it's obviously going to cost a lot more money. So it's not a good way to price. The best way to price, if you want a good idea at this stage, is to use our new pricing tool on our prices page. But just to let you know that some of the bigger houses on their estimated costs are around about £2,500 square metre. The biggest ones, the smallest ones will be over the areas will be working out at £4,000 a square metre. That's just the nature of building.
And final question, then we'll wrap up. Can you buy a HebHomes house and hire Dualchas to design a connection to a traditional white house?
Well, you could do. I'm sure you could. I mean, I think quite often before you do that, you'd want Dualchas to go and look at your white house and look at how appropriate it is. Quite often, I mean, it's a fairly common thing. It's like people want an extension, and then you go and look at the project, and actually, it's more cost effective to reorganise the existing house and then do a smaller extension, and it's much more cost effective. So, I mean, I'd always say is don't build bigger than you have to. And I'm not trying to do down HebHomes here and lose them a job, but I think quite often it's just the most important thing is the approach at the beginning, it's the discussion at the beginning. An architect earns their crust mostly at initial design stage when you're interrogating the brief, interrogating the budget, and coming up with the ideas. And that's particularly when you're doing renovation extension projects, where sometimes a simple approach can work better. I mean, just one anecdote, Mary Arnold Foster used to work with Dualchas. She used to tell the story about this person who wanted a large extension in London, and she went to see the house, and then she wrote down a number, and the woman said, "What's that?" And Mary said, "It's the number of a skip hire company. Just get rid of all your crap. You don't need an extension." And so it's not always like that, but sometimes it's about the rethinking the spaces and how you use it and what you have, and it can actually get you a much more cost-effective solution.
Great. Okay, we'll wrap up there. Thank you very much, Neil and Alasdair. That's been a really insightful and balanced discussion. So hopefully today has shown that there isn't a single right or wrong answer. It's really what is the best route for you and for your site. Both routes can obviously deliver exceptional contemporary homes. The key is understanding the trade-offs around time, cost, flexibility, and risk before you commit. So if today has sparked questions about your own project, we'd be very happy to continue the conversation. So reach out to Dualchas or HebHomes, whichever route you'd prefer to take, and we can take the conversation a little bit further. So thanks again all for joining us this afternoon, and I wish you all a very good day. Thank you, Neil and Alasdair. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, Fraser.